The trees moved differently now. Rotvar had walked forests before some old, some haunted, some carved with names no longer spoken. But this forest was listening. Its branches creaked not with wind, but with decision. Its roots seemed to lean into his steps, not to trip, but to know. The path ahead was no longer one he chose, it was one that had already prepared for his arrival. Above him, the sky held a tight stillness, like a string pulled taut. He had left the coastline 3 days ago. The sea behind him was quiet. Too quiet, no boats, no birds, just waves lapping without breath. And now the forest stood in its place as if to test whether he had left anything behind. He had not, only carried, and the bowl, now dry, was tucked beneath his cloak, bound in leather wrap, humming against his side when night came. The first village appeared at the edge of a glade, small, 5 huts. One tower made from fused bone and timber, no smoke from chimneys. No animals in sight, but there were people, standing, waiting. Not with weapons, with questions etched in their posture. A child held a rope. An elder gripped a polished stone. A man wore rings on every finger, each carved with spirals that did not match. As Rotvar approached, no one spoke, but all of them watched his hands. He raised his right spiral exposed. A collective breath was held, and then the elder stepped forward. "Have you come from the south?" Rotvar shook his head, from beneath. The elder did not react, only stepped closer. "Do you carry it?" "I carry what came back with me," he said. "Then come, you're late." They led him into the tower. Inside, warmth, smoke, carved symbols on the floor, some glowing faintly, others scratched out. At the center, a figure seated in silence, eyes closed, breathing, but only barely. Rotvar paused. The elder spoke. "She saw your path 3 seasons ago, then stopped speaking. Said the world had bent inward and that something old was climbing out." "Did she say where it'd go?" "No." The elder looked at him. "Only that you'd come." Rotvar stepped forward. The woman's eyes opened. Pale, milky, but filled with direction. She spoke, voice brittle as frost on bark. "You brought the end of silence with you. I brought the memory of it. Same thing." She raised a finger not to him, but to the wall. A map hung there, but it was not a map of land. It was a pattern. Lines drawn in curves, arrows through loops, circles intersecting spirals. One long thread looped around it all. "They are waiting for you here," she said, pointing to a mark near the top. "Who?" "The ones who remember too soon." Rotvar studied the map. "And if I don't go?" She smiled faintly. "Then the arrows fall anyway, but none will know who loosed them." That night he sat outside the tower. Stars moved differently in this sky. They curved slightly like distant sparks caught in wind. The people stayed inside. The forest pressed in closer. And just before dawn, the wind carried a sound, not a scream, not a cry, but the whistle of arrows falling into ground too far away to be heard, yet close enough to wake a name inside him he had not worn in years. By morning, the forest had changed, subtly. The wind moved with urgency, as if it had heard the whistle in the night, and now carried word of it between leaves. Birds flew low, branches leaned toward the path. The air was cooler not in temperature, but in weight. Rotvar left before the village woke, not out of fear, out of timing, because something in his chest behind the spiral, beneath the breath, told him that if he didn't move now, someone else would arrive too late. He followed no trail, only motion, only pressure. The bowl under his cloak began to hum again, not with heat or sound, but with vibration, like a stone remembering what it had once held. Hours passed. The trees thinned, then stopped, and before him opened a field. Wide, wet, empty, except arrows, dozens, maybe hundreds. All planted upright in the mud, not fallen, planted, ranged in curved lines. Some snapped, some whole. All pointed upward toward the same thing, a man, standing at the center of the field, motionless. Arrows stuck from the ground around him in a perfect circle, but none had touched him. Rotvar approached carefully. Each step into the field made no sound. Even the mud refused to squelch, as if the arrows had ordered silence. When he reached the outer edge of the circle, the man turned. He was old, older than the air, hair gray. Face carved in creases, spiral tattooed across his chest burned, not inked. His arms hung by his sides, no weapon, no shield, only presence. "You didn't come with them," the man said. "I came after," Rotvar replied. "They thought I would kneel. Did you?" The man smiled faintly. The arrows did. Rotvar stepped into the circle. No arrow moved. Who were they? Messengers, but not for me. He turned his head slightly as if listening to something underground. "They're trying to awaken it early." Awaken what? The next silence. A pause. The one that doesn't wait for names to be buried. The one that buries them mid-sentence. Rotvar approached him fully now. They stood only a pace apart. The spiral on his palm glowed not bright, but sharp. "You've been here a long time," Rotvar said. The man nodded. "Because I remember what happens if no one stands in the field." "What happens?" The man looked beyond him, to the forest. Then the arrows don't fall straight. They curve, and pierce the ones still learning their first words. Silence stretched. The wind returned light, curling through shafts of light between clouds. Rotvar looked at the man's bare feet, caked in earth. "You can leave now." "No," the man said. "Why not?" He turned back to Rotvar, eyes calm. "Because you haven't stood here long enough yet." Rotvar stood still. The man did not move. Around them, the arrows trembled not from wind, from memory. As if the field itself recalled other feet, other faces. Other days when messengers came not with questions, but with warnings shaped like weapons. "How long have you stood here?" Rotvar asked. "Since the spiral closed," the man said. "Which one?" A pause, a smile that didn't reach the eyes. Exactly. The answer wasn't cryptic, it was true. Because some spirals don't begin where others end. Some reopen in the same breath they're sealed. Rotvar stepped beside him. No resistance. The earth beneath his feet softened, not in surrender. In recognition. And then, from behind them, a sound, not one. Two. One sharp, one soft, one struck, one whispered. He turned. Across the field, a figure emerged from the trees, tall, cloaked, carrying a bow that looked too old to have been carved, and too new to have been ignored. They did not run, they walked, deliberate. Confident, their face hidden, their steps curved in an arc around the field, avoiding every planted arrow with unnatural precision. Rotvar didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't have one, but his right palm flexed, and the spiral flared once like a signal. The figure stopped 20 paces out, spoke in a voice that sounded like it belonged to 3 people at once. "The field isn't yours." The old man beside Rotvar didn't turn. "It was never anyone's. Then step out of it. Then make me..." The old man said quietly. The figure raised a hand. From behind their back, a single arrow, black, smooth, spiral carved. Rotvar inhaled. He'd seen arrows like that before once, long ago. When silence first took shape, the arrow wasn't for killing. It was for reminding. The figure notched the arrow to the bow, pulled, held. Rotvar stepped forward. The spiral on his hand burned, and the moment he did, the arrow shattered in the air, not from force, from refusal. The air bent around it, the field groaned. The arrows planted in the earth rippled outward, pulsing once in a wave that passed through Rotvar's ribs like memory echoing between bones. The figure lowered their hand. "So it's true," they said. "You came back." Rotvar narrowed his eyes. "Who are you?" A pause, a name that never got buried properly. They turned and vanished back into the trees. The old man exhaled. The first arrow never misses, but it didn't fly. Rotvar said, "No, because you were standing here." The wind quieted again. The figure had vanished into the trees, but something in the ground still pulsed, like the memory of impact without the impact itself. The air was tighter. The arrows around them leaned slightly now, each one no longer upright but listening. Rotvar turned to the old man. "You knew they'd come. They always come," the man said. But they never stay. Because of the arrows? The old man shook his head. Because of what the arrows refuse. They sat at the center of the circle. Rotvar traced a spiral into the earth beside his foot. And for a moment it glowed not visibly, not brightly, but in the skin. Why are they planting arrows instead of drawing blades, he asked. The old man tapped one of the shafts gently. Because silence became smarter. It learned not to shout. A pause, then softer. It learned to fly. As the sky dimmed and the light bent orange through the trees, Rotvar spoke again. The man in the cloak? The one who left, he said he was a name that never got buried. That's worse than being forgotten, the old man replied. Why? Because the dead don't chase what buried them, but the unburied, they still walk with arrows in their hands. Rotvar looked out beyond the field. There are more. Yes, coming, said the old man, standing. They've already arrived. From the trees emerged 3 figures, not rushing. Not hiding, all silent, all masked. Their hands were empty, but their posture wasn't. The first wore a cloak stitched with teeth. The second had spiral scars across their bare arms, precise, symmetrical. The third was smallest a youth, perhaps, but their mask had no mouth. They stopped at the edge of the field. Rotvar stood slowly. The old man didn't move. What do you want? Rotvar called. The figure in the cloak replied. Voice low, measured. Not what, who. Then speak their name. We would, but he hasn't chosen it yet. Rotvar's eyes narrowed. Me? They all bowed slightly in perfect synchronization. The youth stepped forward. Lifted both hands, and in the dirt, they traced a spiral in reverse, counterclockwise. When they finished, it flared once, red, then vanished. Rotvar stepped forward. The spiral on his palm itched. What does that mean? That your name hasn't caught up to you yet, the cloaked figure replied. And until it does, every arrow will miss, but none will stop. The old man finally stirred. You'll have to leave the field, boy. Why? Because it's time. Time for what? He smiled, soft, sad, for you to learn what silence sounds like. When you're the one holding the bow. The old man stepped back, out of the circle, out of the field, and suddenly, Rotvar felt the weight of space change. Where once there had been presence, now there was only him. The figures at the edge did not move. The arrows in the ground did not tremble. But something unseen shifted, as if the ground beneath his feet had become expectant. Then the youth stepped forward again, and from beneath their cloak, they withdrew a bow. It was shaped from pale horn and black wood, wrapped at the grip with braided fiber, but it had no string. They placed it gently on the ground just inside the circle, then stepped back. The message was clear. Rotvar approached. The bow didn't hum. It didn't glow. It simply waited. He knelt beside it, touched it. The spiral on his palm reacted not with heat, not with light, but with tone. He heard nothing, but his chest resonated like someone had plucked a string that ran straight through his spine. What happens if I lift it? He asked aloud. The cloaked figure answered. Then you become the silence, and if I don't? The masked youth tilted their head. Then we will. Rotvar stood, bow in hand. It was heavier than he expected, and still, it had no string. The others did not move, but the sky above darkened, the wind picked up. And in the forest, leaves began to fall sideways unnaturally, as if gravity itself had been redirected toward him. It won't fire, he said. It's incomplete. So are you, came the reply. The air split. A sharp crack, not of sound, but of possibility, tore through the moment. And before he could breathe, the bow pulled itself. A strand of air coiled between its limbs. And from it a single arrow, made of nothing. Made of everything he had chosen to carry, shaped from moments unspoken. Balanced by names unremembered. Pointed by choices left unfinished. He didn't draw it. He didn't need to. The bow aimed itself, toward the space between the 3 figures. The arrow hummed a frequency too true to lie. This isn't for them, Rotvar said quietly. No, said the cloaked one. It's for what stands behind them. Rotvar looked closer, and only then did he see a 4th shape, hidden in the trees, not masked, not armed, just watching. The moment he saw it, the arrow released itself. No sound, no recoil, just motion, and the figure behind the three stepped forward, took the arrow in the chest, not like a wound, like a key into a lock, and the ground beneath the trees broke open, silently, and the fourth figure fell through it, gone. The others did not scream, did not run. They simply turned and bowed, low. Deliberate, final. Rotvar stood, breath shallow. The bow in his hands was already fading. The spiral on his palm was dim. The silence around him had changed. It no longer waited to be broken. It was waiting to see what he would say next. The trees were quiet, too quiet. Rotvar stood alone again. The cloaked figures had vanished into the tree line like breath into frost, no sound. No parting words, not even footprints. The bow had dissolved. The arrow was gone, but the hole remained, a circle in the earth. Perfectly round where the fourth figure had fallen. No blood, no smoke. Just dirt packed like it had never been disturbed, but pulsing slightly. Like it was catching its breath. Rotvar knelt beside it. The spiral on his palm ached. A quiet ache, not pain, memory returning to the surface. "Where did they fall?" he whispered, and the hole answered, not with words, with a voice that wasn't voice, a sound beneath language. It rose up through the soil, passed through his knees, filled his ribs, and whispered within his skull. Under this forest lies a mouth, and mouths remember what was never said. He rose, not because he wanted to move, because the ground no longer wanted him still. He began to walk not away, not toward but along the curve of something unseen. The forest around him twisted imperceptibly. Trees began to lean toward one another, branches forming arches overhead, like ribs curving inward. He followed, and soon he saw it. A hill. No, a skull, massive, covered in moss, half buried in vines, not beast, not human, something in between. Its jaw was open, half collapsed, and inside, a staircase, carved from tongue-shaped stone. Descending, no one guarded it, nothing blocked it. It was not hidden. It was remembered. Rotvar approached. Each step toward the mouth thickened the air, not with scent, with weight. And then, just as he reached the threshold, the spiral on his palm flared. Once, twice, and then a voice. Real, sharp, behind him. "You shouldn't go down there." He turned. A woman stood at the edge of the trees, alone. Her cloak was made of ash feathers and bone needles. Her eyes were black. Not evil, just empty of forgetting. "It's not sealed for your sake," she said. "Then whose? For what's inside? It doesn't want out, but it wants to be seen." Rotvar stepped down one stone. The forest didn't protest, neither did she. "If you're going to walk in," she said, "take this." She tossed him a small object. He caught it. A spiral cut into a tooth, still warm, still alive. "What is it?" he asked. "Something that used to chew memory." She turned, walked into shadow, gone. He looked at the tooth, then at the mouth, and without hesitation, he stepped inside. The steps were slick, not with water, with age. Each one felt curved, like it had been carved by breath instead of tools. The spiral on Rotvar's palm glowed faintly with every third step, as if sinking to something far below. He passed carvings in the walls. None were visible, but he could feel them. Symbols scraped not onto stone, but into the space between stone and memory. They weren't seen, they were recognized. The air changed. First warmer, then sweet, then metallic like iron that once tasted blood, but had since forgotten the teeth. He reached the bottom. It wasn't far, but it felt like he had walked through someone else's throat. The chamber opened wide, massive, round, lined with ribs. It was not built, it was grown. At the center, a pool, still, black, silent. It reflected nothing, not even the pale shimmer from Rotvar's palm. He stepped to its edge. Kneeling, he dipped 2 fingers into the water. It was cold, then warm, then welcome. The word didn't come from above or around, or behind. It came from inside him. He stood quickly. Something moved across the surface of the pool, a ripple. Not from him, from underneath. "You carry it," the voice said. "The spiral." Rotvar asked aloud. "No," the voice replied. "The decision." The tooth in his pocket shifted, growing hot. He pulled it out. It glowed faintly now. The spiral carved into it pulsed in sync with the one on his palm. "What is this place?" he asked. A chamber of unspoken words. A reservoir of what was too sharp to write and too soft to scream. A pause. "And now it is your reflection." Rotvar looked into the pool again. This time it showed something. Not him, not a person, but a moment. He saw a boy younger than memory standing at a shoreline, watching fire burn across water. In his hand, a spiral carved into driftwood. He turned, and Rotvar saw his own face, not older, not younger, but parallel. "What am I seeing?" "The version of you that never left the mouth." "You mean the spiral?" "No, the silence." Rotvar took a step back. The pool darkened. The ribs of the chamber creaked like something stirring in sleep. "What happens now? That depends," said the voice. "On what?" "On how far down you want to remember." The chamber began to pulse. The pool shimmered again. And from beneath the surface, something rose. Not a figure, a face, carved from root, eyes empty, mouth stitched. It floated just below the surface and stared up at him, waiting. It hovered beneath the surface, still. The face made of root and silence. Its eyes were smooth hollows. Its mouth sewn tight with threads of moss or something older. It didn't blink. It didn't rise, it simply was. Rotvar knelt at the edge of the pool. The spiral on his palm pulsed once, then stopped. Even the chamber itself seemed to wait. "Who are you?" he asked. The voice answered again, but not from the face, from everywhere else. "It is not a who, it is a when," he frowned. "A when?" The moment silence became too heavy to hold, and was given a face. So others wouldn't forget what it cost. The root face shifted, not by swimming, by unfolding. Its shape loosened beneath the surface, revealing threads, carvings, spirals etched in long dead bark. It wasn't alive, but it remembered life. "If I touch it," Rotvar asked, "then it will open." "And if it opens?" The chamber creaked again, not in threat, in warning. "Then you will carry what it wanted to say, but never could." He hesitated, looked down at the bowl tucked beneath his cloak, unwrapped it, held it beside the water. It was still dry. But the air above the pool shimmered faintly, like it wanted to fill it. He dipped the bowl into the black water. The face didn't react. But the moment liquid touched the stone, the threads across its mouth tightened, then snapped. A sound broke through the pool. Not a scream, not a voice, a tone. Low, subsonic, like sorrow that had fermented for centuries, and finally found a crack to escape through. Rotvar stumbled back, bowl still in hand, now filled with shifting. Black memory, the face rose, breached the surface fully, and the eyes opened. But not to see, to project. Rotvar fell to one knee as images surged into him. A village burned not by flame, but by forgetting. A child whose voice was replaced by a spiral etched into her tongue. A river that refused to reflect any face that did not remember its dead. A sword made from the bones of stories untold. A man, his shape standing at the edge of a cliff, holding a bow made of silence, firing an arrow made of guilt. He gasped. The bowl steamed. The face spoke not aloud, but into him. "Now you've heard it. What?" The voice of the silence. "What do I do with it?" "Decide." And then the pool stilled. The face sank. The voice faded. The bowl in his hand grew cool. And from the tunnel behind him, the stairs back up, a sound echoed. Footsteps. The footsteps were slow, measured. They didn't echo with menace, but with familiarity, as though the person descending the stairs had walked this path before, many times, in dreams, or in lives that never reached the surface. Rotvar stood still beside the pool, bowl in hand, the spiral on his palm now faintly flickering, like a candle tested by wind but not extinguished. He didn't call out, because he knew. The one who approached didn't need introduction. The figure appeared in the arch, tall, wrapped in dark wool, a hood drawn low. No weapon, no mask, just the weight of someone who remembered too much, and had come to return what no longer belonged to them. "You took the bowl," the figure said. Rotvar nodded. "It filled itself." A pause. "No," the voice corrected. "It filled with what you were willing to carry." The figure stepped forward. Rotvar didn't flinch. He recognized the posture. Not threatening, mirroring. They stopped beside the pool, looked down. The face beneath had vanished. Only calm water now. "It spoke to you?" "It showed me," Rotvar said. "Pain, loss, names eaten before they were spoken." The figure tilted its head. "And did it ask anything in return?" "No." "Then you are lucky." "Why?" The figure removed their hood, revealing a face much like his own older. Scarred. The same eyes, the same jaw, but a spiral across the left cheek. Burned in and cracked. "Because when it spoke to me," the figure said. I answered. Rotvar narrowed his eyes. "You?" "Yes, before the figure said. When I was you. When I carried the bowl and never filled it. When I chose silence and let it grow teeth." Rotvar said nothing. The spiral on his palm throbbed once hard, then stilled. "What are you now?" he asked. "An echo," the older one said. "Sent forward so you wouldn't become me, but you just said." The spiral repeats, but it does not always loop the same. The bowl in Rotvar's hand grew light, almost weightless. The water inside shimmered. "What am I supposed to do with it?" he asked. The older self turned toward the stairs. "Pour it where no one remembers they're thirsty." That could be anywhere. Exactly. They started walking up, not together, but one behind the other, as if timeline and memory had agreed to share the same stairs for one climb. When they reached the surface, the air had changed. The forest was listening again, and far above them, a sound split the sky. A single arrow, drawn, not fired, held, waiting for direction. The light above the forest had shifted. The sun was still there, dim, filtered through gray clouds and leaning branches, but the shadows were sharper. Not from light, from tension. The old version of Rotvar, the one with the cracked spiral on his cheek, had not followed. He had vanished the moment the trees opened. No farewell, only permission. Now, Rotvar walked alone again. The bowl in his hands trembled once, then stilled. The black water inside no shimmered. It held stillness like it knew something was approaching. He came upon a clearing, wide, flat, too quiet. At its center stood a single post of carved stone, knee-high, cracked, old. He approached it, placed the bowl atop it. It fit perfectly. Not like design, like repetition. "How many times has this been done?" he whispered. The spiral on his palm offered no warmth, only a faint ache. Like an echo that no longer returned home. Then he heard it again. The arrow, still in the air, still pulled, still waiting. He looked up. Saw it not flying, not descending, but held mid-sky. A silver line stretched from the horizon to the clouds, bowing gently, as if drawn by a bow too far away to see. And somewhere he knew someone was holding it, not with hands, with intent. The bowl pulsed, and the air began to move. Wind. At first, then breath, then whispers, dozens, then hundreds. Not loud, but persistent. They poured from the trees, from the moss, from the dirt, from the very air itself. None had form, only presence. Each one said the same thing. "You carry what we could not finish. You carry what we forgot to forgive. You carry the spiral into the place it never reached." Rotvar stood, eyes locked on the arrow above. "Then tell me where to aim it." Silence. Then, where the silence has grown teeth. He understood. Not a location, a direction. He turned east. The wind shifted with him, and the spiral on his palm reawakened bright now, burning. The arrow in the sky trembled, still held, but not for long, and far away. Someone else felt the air grow colder. They did not know why. But they stepped back from the fire and looked toward the tree line, unaware that something had finally chosen a path back. The village was small, built on a hill that once held stones carved with names now broken, their glyphs worn down by wind and rewriting. No one here remembered the spiral. Not truly, but some still felt it, like a splinter behind the ribs, a hum in the blood when rain fell sideways, a sense of being watched, not by gods but by choices never made. Rotvar did not enter the village. He stood at the tree line, bowl in hand, watching. A woman stirred a pot over a slow fire. Children played with sticks shaped like spears, but none pointed them. A man carved wood, not figures, but patterns. Spirals that looped wrong. Off balance, too sharp. Like someone trying to recall a symbol they'd only ever dreamed. He stepped forward. The grass didn't resist, but the fire did. As he neared, the flames bent not away from wind, away from him. The woman looked up, froze, not in fear, in recognition she couldn't name. "We've seen you," she said quietly. "No," Rotvar replied. "You've seen someone walk like I remember?" The man with the carving knife stood slowly. He held the piece of wood toward Rotvar, a spiral, almost correct. "I didn't know what it meant," the man said. "I just kept making it." "You remembered with your hands," Rotvar said. "That's enough." He placed the bowl beside the fire. The flames shifted again, narrowed, turned blue at the edges. The woman gasped softly. From the bowl, a faint line of steam rose, and then a sound, a whisper, low, gentle, but filled with weight. The children stopped. Even the wind paused. "What is that?" the woman asked. "Water from the mouth beneath the forest," Rotvar said. "It speaks for the ones who weren't heard in time. And why here? Because your fire burns, but it doesn't warm anything." The steam curled upward into the air, forming shapes not quite seen. Faces. Moments. Fragments of truth spoken in places where no one listened. A girl with sewn lips. A man planting arrows. A river that never flowed the same twice. Each hovered, then vanished, and the air felt clearer. The fire stopped bending. It burned steady now, bright, silent. The man with the spiral carving knelt. "Should we remember you?" he asked. Rotvar shook his head. "No. Just listen when the wind moves the wrong direction." "How will we know it's wrong?" "Because it will carry a name that no one here has ever said aloud." He turned. The villagers did not follow. But none forgot the warmth that finally came from the fire after he left. Rotvar moved through the hills. Each step left no imprint. But something followed behind. Not a shape. A shift. Wherever he passed, grass curled slightly inward. Crows circled lower. Children woke from dreams they couldn't explain. Somewhere, a man dropped a hammer mid-swing and whispered, "Hez walking again." At the crest of a ridge, Rotvar stopped. Below a plain, wide, empty, no villages, no roads, only a single tree, white, dead, split down the center, at its base a shape, no, a heap. He descended. Each step made the wind louder, not stronger louder, as if it had something to say but didn't know what words were made of. When he reached the tree, he saw the truth. The heap was a pile of arrows. Hundreds. Some snapped, some new, some too ancient for explanation. They weren't fired, they had fallen, vertically, driven straight into the ground from above, as if the sky had let them go all at once. No blood, no bones, just message. He knelt, touched one. It vibrated, and in his chest a whisper. "We tried." Another arrow, we warned. Another, we never missed, but we never mattered. Rotvar stood slowly. The spiral on his palm began to pulse, not with light but with gravity. The bowl at his side steamed faintly, though the wind was cold. He looked up. The sky was gray, empty, but one cloud glowed. A perfect circle of white above the broken tree. Who sent them? He asked the air. No answer, only one final arrow, half buried near his foot. He pulled it free. The shaft was black, the spiral carved upside down. On the fletching a single phrase, burned into those who won't wait to listen. He turned it in his hands, then threw it back into the pile. It landed without sound. He sat beneath the split tree, not to rest, to hear what wasn't said. And the wind, once uncertain, finally spoke in full. "There is one more arrow, not yet loosed, not yet shaped. It waits in a hand that hasn't closed. He knew what it meant. Not prophecy, not riddle, just a fact. Somewhere ahead, someone was waiting for him. Someone armed, but not with steel. With silence sharp enough to fly. He walked for a day, maybe more. The land had changed. It no pushed against him. Now it adjusted, curling slightly, as if reshaping paths to match his direction. Not out of reverence, out of inevitability. Rotvar's steps no belonged. By dusk he reached the cliffs, stone, high, flat-edged. Overlooking a valley blanketed in low fog. Beyond it, towers, black, broken. Still, he didn't know the name of the place, but the wind did. It spoke in pieces. This was once called the place where decisions were delayed. Now, it forgets why it was ever built. He descended the cliff path. No guards. No gates, just wind and memory watching. In the center of the ruins stood a monolith, tall, spiral carved, but not deep. As if the one who etched it didn't finish. As if their hand shook. He stepped closer and saw them, a figure sitting at the base of the monolith. Back against the stone, eyes open, unblinking, alive, but still. As if caught between choice and release. They wore no armor, no weapons. But on their lap rested a quiver, empty. Rotvar knelt a few steps away, waited. Finally, the figure blinked. "I've been expecting you," they said. "Who are you?" The voice was neither male nor female, neither old nor young. Just measured, a message no one finished sending. They looked down at the quiver. "Do you know what this is?" Rotvar nodded, a place where arrows wait to become truth. The figure smiled faintly. "Then you know what happens when there are none left." A pause. No silence, Rotvar said. Only clarity, exactly. The bowl at Rotvar's side hissed softly. Steam curled upward, forming a faint spiral in the air before dissolving. "They gave me this," he said, "so I could carry what wasn't spoken." "They gave me this," the figure said, tapping the quiver. "So I could fire what wasn't heard." They both sat still. Wind passing between them. The stone monolith behind them began to glow faintly, not with light, but with reminder. "Do you want to fire again?" Rotvar asked. "No," the figure said, "but I want someone else to decide not to." They reached into the quiver, and from its empty space withdrew one arrow. Spiral pointed, fletched with ashbird feather. They handed it to Rotvar. "This one's for you. Who's it meant for?" "You'll know when you meet the one who never stopped aiming." Rotvar took it. It pulsed once in his hand, not with power, with possibility. He placed it inside the leather wrap beside the bowl, and stood. "Are you staying?" The figure nodded. "Until I'm forgotten properly." Rotvar walked into the ruins. Behind him, the stone monolith cracked, not broken, just relieved. The valley narrowed. Stone teeth rose on either side of the path. High and jagged shape, not by erosion, but by hesitation. Like the land had once tried to close, then thought better of it. The fog thickened, the wind thinned, time curved. Rotvar moved without question, because questions now were too slow. The arrow in his wrap pulsed, its spiral tip warm. Its shaft humming like a thought ready to become action. It didn't ask to be fired, but it waited to matter. He reached the clearing. Small, surrounded by stone arches. 7 of them, cracked, leaning. Each carved with spirals not like the ones he carried. These spirals were sharp, tense, unforgiving. And at the center of them stood a person, archer's stance. Motionless, bow drawn, arrow aimed, at him. He didn't stop walking, didn't raise his hands. Didn't speak. Because he knew anything too sudden would break the thread between moments. And that thread was all that held the air together. The archer didn't move. Their face was hidden beneath a cloth mask, but their posture perfect. They had been standing like this a long time, waiting for him. For this version of him, not to kill, to see what he would choose. Rotvar stopped 5 steps away, the arrowhead aimed at his chest. He looked at it, then at the bow, then at the stillness in the archer's eyes. And finally, he stepped aside to the right. Out of the line of fire, but still within reach, still within voice. You don't want to loose it, he said. The archer didn't answer. But the fingers holding the string tightened slightly. I brought one too, Rotvar said. He unwrapped the spiral-tipped arrow, held it lightly in both hands. Not raised, not threatened, offered. This one's not meant to fly, he said. It's meant to finish what began before either of us had names. The archer blinked. Their bow creaked not from pressure, from memory. What did they give you? Rotvar asked. A pause. Then the archer spoke. The right to decide when forgetting stops. Rotvar nodded, then decide. And he offered the arrow. They released the bowstring. But the arrow did not fly. It fell, softly, into the grass. And the wind exhaled again. The road narrowed again, not from terrain, from time. It curled like a coil that had forgotten its start point. The trees no towered, they leaned, forming slow arches above him. Not out of reverence, out of habit. This path had been walked before, by him, and not by him. By others who bore spirals not on their skin, but in their intent. He carried the bowl in one hand, the empty quiver strapped tight to his back. Each step drew not closer to a place, but to a pulse. Ahead, a wall of stone. Natural, massive, split down the center, a crack like a scar. Inside blackness, but not dark. Heavy. Rotvar approached. The wind pulled away. The spiral on his palm grew warm again, but not alive. Just awake, he pressed his hand to the stone. It moved, not like a door, like a decision being undone. And the crack widened. He stepped through. At first, the tunnel felt like any other cave. But the moment he passed the threshold, something shifted. The air changed. Not scent, not texture, pressure. It was as if every word ever left unsaid now gathered behind his ears. And then, voices. Thousands. But not screaming, chanting, softly, layered. One phrase, over and over. The ones who never left still wait for the one who almost returned. He continued. The tunnel led downward, always downward. At one point, the floor became smooth, then slick, then soft. He looked down. It wasn't stone anymore. It was skin, etched with spirals, not human, but not beast. Something older. He walked upon a being that had not died, only laid still long enough to become land. Then light. A chamber, circular. Torches lined the edges, though no one had lit them. They burned anyway. And in the center, a group. 7 figures, seated in a circle, hooded. Still, breathing. Before each one, a bowl. Empty, except one. That bowl shimmered black water, just like his own. As Rotvar entered, they all looked up in unison. No faces, only mouths. Each marked with different spiral variations, none complete. The one directly in front of him spoke. You are late, or you are early, another said. Depends which silence we're speaking of, said a third. He stepped into the circle, held his bowl. The one with the filled vessel gestured. Sit, and choose which version of yourself we will speak to. Why? Because not all of you survived the walk here. Rotvar didn't flinch. He placed his bowl on the floor and sat. The fire dimmed slightly, not out of fear, out of respect. And the mouths began to speak, one by one, not to him, as him, each repeating a choice he hadn't yet made. Each offering a truth he would need to claim or bury. And as their voices layered, he realized he wasn't being tested. He was being made into something that could not lie anymore. The fire didn't flicker. It bent, inward, toward the circle of 7. Their mouths continued moving, but no sound filled the air now. Instead, the words curled through the space like smoke made of remembrance. Every syllable landed inside his chest, not his ears, each voice his own. But altered. One, younger the way he might have spoken had he never entered the river. One, colder as if silence had become the only tool he trusted. One, burned cracked by guilt that never spoke its name. Each version laid something before him, not objects, moments. The younger voice offered him a child's laughter, one he never got to hear. The colder one offered a battlefield, empty of corpses, but full of choices he hadn't made. The burned one offered only a bowl. Shattered. "This is who you were when you stopped listening," the burned voice whispered. "And when did I begin again?" Rotvar asked. No answer, only firelight on bone, the spiral on his palm split. Not broken, parted, like bark giving way to bloom from the opening heat. Then chill, then clarity. The seated figures leaned forward slightly. "You carry a name," they said in unison, "but not the one you were given." He nodded. "I've outgrown it." "Then speak the one you can't walk away from." Rotvar was silent, his mouth opened. But no word came, because the name that now formed behind his teeth wasn't sound, it was weight. He closed his eyes, let breath fill him, and when he opened them again, the chamber had changed. The 7 figures sat. They stood, but not as judges, as echoes. Each one stepped toward him, touched his shoulders, his back, his hand, one by one. They gave something back to him, not gifts, not blessings, pieces, a memory of why he'd left the first time, a promise made over a grave never marked, a night spent in prayer not for a god, but for a reason, a bow unstrung by someone he failed to stop, a kiss never given, a scream held in the back of his throat through 3 winters, and the final piece, a spiral, whole, not burned, not scratched, not drawn, carved into the air in front of him, alive. "This is your name," they said. Not to speak, but to walk. He reached out, touched it. The spiral entered him, not like a possession, like alignment. His eyes glowed. His spine straightened, the fire went out, and still, he saw clearly. "Now," they said, "return to where no one speaks your name, and leave behind something they'll never stop hearing." The spiral pulsed once inside his chest, then settled. It didn't disappear. It simply anchored itself not as a mark, but as direction. Rotvar stood alone in the chamber now. The 7 were gone. No sound, no ashes. Just footprints in the dust, his own, and the ones that once walked beside him and now walked within him. The bowl was still warm, the arrow still silent. The quiver still empty but ready. He turned and climbed. The tunnel no breathed, it waited. Like a door not yet knocked on but already unlatched. Outside, the land had shifted again. Clouds coiled overhead in silent spirals, drawn into each other like memory collapsing inward. The trees didn't sway. They leaned toward him, not out of reverence, out of recognition. At the edge of the valley stood a rider, horse pale, cloaked in green. No sword, no bow, just a banner tied to their back. Rotvar stepped down from the ridge. The rider didn't move, didn't speak. But their eyes followed him with the weight of someone who had waited across lifetimes to ask one question. "Did you take it?" Rotvar nodded. "I did. Is it full?" "Not with what I expected." The rider dismounted, stepped forward, held out a hand. Rotvar placed the bowl into their palms. They looked into it, said nothing, then drank. They collapsed, not dead, but emptied, and from their mouth came a sound no throat should make. A roar made of names, a flood of syllables never finished, screamed, choked, or whispered too quietly to matter. Now returning all at once like a tide that never accepted the shoreline. The sky darkened, the wind bent, and from the east, across the horizon, shadows stirred. Not soldiers, not spirits, but something in between. The rider stood again, eyes wet with echoes. "They're coming," they said. "I know, and what will you do?" Rotvar turned, looked back the way he came, then forward into the gathering dark. "Walk until they remember why they aimed at us in the first place." And as the first shadows crested the far hills, the arrow in his wrap began to hum, not for war, for answer. They gathered like weather, not marching, not running, simply appearing. Figures in the distance, rising from the fog like truths returning to a world that had outgrown honesty. They wore no colors, no armor, no emblems, but every movement screamed. "We remember what forgetting cost." Rotvar stood on the hilltop, the wind behind him, the valley before him. The quiver on his back still empty, but it pulsed with potential like lungs holding their breath. The rider remained kneeling beside the bowl, eyes closed, hands open, as if they had delivered their message and now waited for the world to react. The figures drew closer, some tall, some broken. Some moved like they hadn't walked in years, others like they'd never stopped. None carried weapons, but all were aimed. And at the center of them, one shape, different. Wrapped in silence, not like a robe, but like skin. Rotvar knew before he even truly saw. "You," he whispered. Not accusation, not anger, recognition. The figure stepped forward, still distant. But the spiral in Rotvar's chest twisted, not in pain. In alignment, he walked a few steps down the hill, stopped. Let his voice carry. "You sent the first arrow." The shape didn't deny it. Didn't speak, only raised a hand. Palm outward, a spiral burned into it, not carved, not inked, branded. Rotvar raised his own, palm forward. Spiral glowing not to match, to balance, and between them the valley shifted. The air became thick, breath slowed. The grass bent in spirals around their feet, clockwise for one, counterclockwise for the other. "We are not enemies," Rotvar said. "We are not friends," came the reply. "Then what are we?" The answer took time, not seconds, seasons. Then, "We are both." What happens? When the arrow does not miss, but the wound becomes a question. The sky dimmed further. Clouds rolled like memory unbound. And then a sound. Not thunder, not footsteps, but inhalation. The whole world breathed in. Waiting. Rotvar unwrapped the final arrow, held it to the wind. The spiral tip pulsed, waiting to be given a reason not to fly. The figure across the valley raised no bow, but something behind them stirred. A wind shaped like choice, a shadow shaped like consequence. The hill did not tremble, Rotvar did not move. Because now movement would mean more than choice. It would mean definition, and neither of them had earned that yet. The wind stopped, not slowed, stopped, as if even air had decided it was no longer neutral. Rotvar and the figure across the valley stood still, spirals glowing faintly in mirrored palms, two echoes separated by history and the refusal to finish a sentence. The sky above churned like wet ash, and the earth waited, but not passively. With expectation, as though this moment was etched into it long ago, not in stone, but in consequence. "You carry it," the voice called again. "I do. And you won't let it go? Not until it chooses." The figure nodded, lifted their hands slightly. Something unseen stirred behind them. Figures in the fog, shapes, people, memories. Rotvar couldn't tell, but they moved as one. Toward him, not to attack, to see if he would move first. He held up the final arrow. The spiral glowed stronger now. It was listening. It pulsed in rhythm with his chest, then began to speed ahead, like a heart deciding to run before the body agrees. He looked down at the quiver on his back, still empty, but humming. A low, continuous sound like tension coiling inside the ribs of a mountain. He turned the arrow, not to aim, to offer. And at that moment, he whispered, "If I fire this, nothing changes. If I don't, everything ends." The figure's voice came soft across the distance. That is how spirals work. Behind him, the rider stirred, spoke for the first time since the collapse. "Then don't aim. Let it aim you." Rotvar raised the arrow overhead. The sky pulsed once a ripple, not light. Breath, and the arrow glowed fully now. Alive. Not weapon. Not symbol. Answer. The figure across the valley lowered their hand, stepped aside, and behind them the fog split, revealing something vast. Stone. Structure. No door, but an opening, not made. Opened, a gate that had no hinges, no name. Just waited for the one who wouldn't force it. Rotvar stepped forward. The arrow hovered in the air behind him, still unloosed. But now, it followed, like a question that finally trusted the answer to walk first. The earth did not shake, the sky did not roar. The fog simply parted slowly, deliberately as if obeying an order whispered long ago. meant only for this moment. Behind the figure, a structure emerged. Not a fortress, not a shrine, a gate, wide, tall. Carved into the cliff face like a scar that chose not to heal. But there were no hinges, no lock, no seal. Just a soft vertical seam where one side stopped and another began. Above it, a spiral inverted. Below it, a symbol Rotvar had never seen before, a line broken at its center. As if something once whole had chosen to divide itself and remain that way. The arrow still floated behind him, quiet now, almost still, as if it, too, was waiting to understand what this gate demanded. The figure beside the gate stepped aside. No gesture, no word, only silence. But not empty, permission. Rotvar approached. The ground beneath him was soft, like memory layered in moss. The wind didn't return, because here, breath itself had paused to witness. He reached the gate, raised his palm, pressed it against the cold seam. The spiral on his hand shimmered. The gate did not open, it understood. A moment passed, then another. Then the stone before him simply vanished. No grinding, no dust. One heartbeat it was there. The next it was history. Inside light, not warm. Not blinding, just present. The kind of light that isn't made but remembered. He stepped forward. The arrow followed. The gate closed silently behind him. Inside silence, but not the silence of absence. The silence of a room that had been speaking too long and finally exhaled. At the center of the chamber, a pedestal. Upon it, a single object, a mask. Spiral carved, split down the middle. One side black as grief, one white as surrender. He approached. The arrow floated beside the mask. Rotvar reached out, didn't touch it. Just waited, and from somewhere unseen, a voice rose. If you wear it, you carry all the silences that never found mouths. And if I don't, then you become one of them. He did not answer, not with voice. He placed his hand on the mask. It didn't flare, it didn't burn. It simply pulsed once with the exact same rhythm as his heart. And from the spiral inside him, the arrow finally settled into the quiver. Not fired, not lost, just home. The mask did not bind to his face. It did not cover him. It merged. Like breath returning to lungs, not as disguise. But as a memory remembered from the inside, his skin cooled, his blood slowed, but his mind sharpened, not with clarity, with each silence he had ever chosen, each word he'd left behind, each gesture that saved a life or let one fall. They were all here now, carried, not buried. He stood at the center of the empty chamber. The arrow rested in the quiver, the spiral on his palm now gone, not erased. Fulfilled. He didn't need it anymore. It had done what spirals are made for. It had led him through. Behind him, the gate reopened. Quiet. The figure from the valley still stood there. But now their eyes were different. Not wide, not cautious, just done. Rotvar passed them without a word, and they stepped aside without a question. Because what could be asked of someone who had just become the end of the sentence? He emerged back into the world. The fog had lifted. The crows above flew in wide, slow loops, no longer circling, just watching. He walked through the stillness of the open plain, and the plain did not follow him. It let him go. Somewhere, the rider had vanished. The bowl was gone. The wind no told stories. Because it had passed its last one to him. Now, the air was quiet for a different reason. Not because it had nothing to say, but because it trusted him to speak when the moment came. Far beyond the hills, people felt the shift. A child dropped a stone and whispered a name they'd never learned. An elder paused in prayer and saw a face they didn't recognize, but wept for anyway. Somewhere, an arrow in a shrine cracked in two without being touched. And somewhere else, far from all of it, a single bell rang once,